How do fractional CMOs hit the ground running? Hi, I'm Dean Way. Welcome to Fractional CMOs and the 90-Day Win. There's a lot of variety in how they kick off new client engagements. In fact, there's so much variety, it's valuable to just listen to what opportunities they look for, what they tackle first, and what they wish wasn't true when they start a new project. So let's find out. Tanya, hi.
Hi, good morning.
Okay, so imagine you just started a new engagement, all right? You're the fractional CMO, and we'll talk about early wins in a moment. But first, what problems do you typically see, or what problems do you normally look for on day one? And also introduce yourself to our audience and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dean. My name's Tanya White. For 5 years, I've been operating as a interim and fractional CMO, as well as a growth advisor for Series A through C startups. Some people may know me because I am the co-chair for the team at South by Southwest that evaluates pitches, and I'm also an angel investor. So there's a few things that I look at right out of the gate, and I would say the number one thing is performance. You know, my job is not to ramp up and take a long time to get going. My job is to jump in and impact results as quickly as possible. So I'm looking immediately at what's running, campaigns, programs, activities, what's happening there. The second thing I look at is how are our finances? Like, how's the money looking? Are we following proper accounting principles? Are we able to calculate ROI? Do we even know what's going on and how those pieces come together? And then the third piece that I'm keeping my eye out, and these are all simultaneous, Dean, is there alignment in the organization? Not just sales, but in product development. You know, are we all working together? Are we getting the message right? Are we actually selling what the engineering team is building? You know, those kinds of things. So those are the first three things I'm looking for right out of the gate.
Right on. Very businessy. Mollie, how about you?
My name is Mollie Barnett. I have been a marketer, marketing CMO, marketing director for about 20 years in all different types of phases of marketing. More recently, it's been a lot of change management, transitions, and working with mid-sized to small businesses across, and even governments, but looking at top level, top down type of marketing. When I jump in, obviously it's a lot of discussion, a lot of discovery, because usually when they're getting to you, they have a problem. And typically what I find is it's goal alignment and communication across the board, internal communication. So that is typically the number one thing I see, and whether or not internally the departments have the same mission. So it's the discovery is typically what everyone sees as the mission of the company, and whether or not everyone is saying the same thing across the board.
Right on. Okay, so Mollie, let's stay with that for a second. Let's flip the question. So what kind of early wins, or I hate this phrase, but what kind of low-hanging fruit do you like to go after, or have you done in the first 90 days typically?
Low-hanging fruit.
Terrible phrase.
Yeah, I'm trying to think as far
like early wins or like quick wins that, you know.
I think, the early win is that typically everybody is saying the same thing. So I'm looking for that repeated phrase.
Right.
It's just sort of gets lost in the sauce. Everyone has their own agenda, and typically people start to fragment because egos typically always get involved in companies, especially of mid-sized companies. So, but typically you'll find that people are saying the same thing. They do have that same thing, that same mission that's being carried out. So I'm looking for that repetitive mission, and I wait for them to say it. I wait to hear it. And once I hear it, I get that hook out of their mouth. And once I get them to start repeating it, it does rise to the surface again. They do remember why they're there. And I'm looking for that vision that's going to drive that company forward again and get that organization aligned again.
Tanya, how about you? What kind of early wins do you like to look for, or like?
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting to me because Mollie and I, you know, it's like we have this crossover as many fractional marketing leaders do. I share a philosophy around change management, its importance. I think it's something unique that fractional leaders bring. I am clearly on much more on the demand gen side of marketing. People bring me in because demand has stalled or they're not getting the ROI out of their programs. So I zoom in immediately on some of the details because again, I when you're not hired full time, I think there's a lot of capacity to give someone full time like 6 months before they have any kind of impact. Fractional and interim people, we don't get that luxury.
Right.
I've got about 30 days to prove my value. So the place that I go immediately is any digital programs. Why do I go there right away? Because those are easy to turn off and on. And they are often burning through money that is not delivering results. And like time and again. So like I'll go right to the website. How are we architected? Are we converting? Are we getting leads? Are we spending ad money? So many companies don't realize that the person who is technically proficient at running Google ads, let's say, is often completely disconnected with the strategy. And they're burning through money marketing to countries that the business doesn't even support, for example. So it's like, yeah, just turn that off. So you want to just get right in there. So I always start with, for me, early wins always are found in the digital marketing space. Are we doing the right emails? Are we segmenting? Is the website performing? So I jump there right away. And again, really ironing out, are we able to articulate our financial investments with the value they're delivering to the business? And it's okay if we're investing in things that we're testing and we're not sure if they're producing results yet, but let's do that knowingly with a hypothesis that we're actually trying to prove out. And again, so many companies are not doing that with their programs.
I agree with that 100%, Tanya. But I think that it's interesting because you find that they're doing those things, but it's the message that gets lost. They'll go ahead and they go for the shiny object, that digital space, but they go forward without having the correct message. They haven't determined the right target, and then they don't get the right win. So they're doing work without progress.
Yes. Well, and Mollie, that's exactly the part you were talking about, which is the alignment, right? You've got these frontline people who, again, are technically competent in their field. Marketing is deeply technical when it comes to executing campaigns and building things, right? But if they're not aligned with the strategy and understand where to point it to, any marketing leader could accidentally just burn through cash that is giving you zero result, right? So that's why, again, we've got that crossover where that alignment, that change management, people understanding the strategy, it's so important. And I think that leaders, CEOs don't do enough. They think they do enough, and it's never enough.
There's a term for that, right? It's Goodman's Law. Goodman's Law? Goodman's Law says that if you've got a goal and a metric or a way to measure it, people will inevitably begin to focus on the metric instead of the goal. So I told this on the classic example is you want to get healthy, so you focus on losing weight. You can definitely go too far with losing weight, and it's unhealthy, right? Or I told this on an earlier podcast. I was in one executive leadership team meeting, and the people, the head of sales, the head of finance, the head of marketing, they would all give their little PowerPoint presentation, sort of summary, and then the CEO later would meet with the board, pick out the best parts or the most interesting parts, or whatever, and use those. And at one point, the head of marketing said, "Oh, and one of the accomplishments we did for the last 30 days is we provided 3,000 leads to sales." And the head of sales was in the room, of course, and he said, "What the hell are you talking about?" And what marketing had done is on the digital side, they had run a bunch of Facebook ads, which I don't know why, because we were an enterprise software company and, we're not selling shampoo. And like 3,000 people had clicked through and and downloaded a PDF or something. And they just handed that CSV of 3,000 first names and email addresses to sales. I said, "Here, we've just given you 3,000 leads." And it's like, this is completely, even if we had the head count to follow up with all these people, it's useless to us. All they've done is click on an ad and download a PDF. Like, they're not prospects. They're not even leads. They're just sort of, names. So yeah, people get, and the Google ads are sort of similar, right? Like, somebody had a really great report. We got this much exposure and this many clicks and all this stuff. And, eventually someone like you asked the question, okay, but like, that's the metric, but the goal was this, and your numbers don't reflect progress toward the goal.
Yeah.
Right? Crazy. Yeah.
We had that conversation. Dean and I, Tanya, had this conversation at one point, because I think as a marketer, we get this question a lot. They said, well, how many leads is that going to produce? And I keep wanting to say to some of these clients are, here's a phone book.
Yeah.
Here's a phone book. What do you want? Because that's garbage.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it's garbage, and you might as well just say that's the end of it. It's not a prospect. It's not necessarily. I'm not here to grow your list.
Yeah.
I'm here to grow your business. I'm looking at how many customers you're going to acquire. How much does that cost? I'm looking at the cost of acquisition and the lifetime value of that customer. And what's that equation, and how fast do they churn?
You're already answering
those
my
are
next
the numbers
question.
that matter to me.
Do you know what I was going to say? Like, I feel like, Mollie, this is exactly one of the distinguishing points between experienced CMOs and maybe new marketing leaders on teams. Like, I've stepped into a lot of situations. I mean, I typically step into situations where there has been some kind of marketing program, and I'm no longer shocked by what I don't find, right? Because I think I look for, well, where's that ROI? And, what are we doing beyond the tactical metric review? Like, how are we impacting the business? What is marketing's contribution for our big budget share? And that's the piece that's often missing. And every time I see that it's missing, I know why I'm there.
And I wonder if that's because there's such a disconnect between the language in the boardroom and the traditional language of the boardroom and the traditional language of creativity and marketing. And it's not an exact science, I mean, we've tried so hard as marketers to measure our progress, and it's become compartmentalized to a certain extent, but we really don't have control of the levers. And I think that the perfect example of that might be the Google algorithm change.
Yeah.
I mean, the people, the search generative experts at the very top of the chain thought they were doing it one way, and it was being handed right down from the top of Google, and they were just trying to protect themselves so that algorithm couldn't be copied by the other search engines. And it was just, they were in shock and awe. The very top of the chain was in shock and awe, because that just wasn't how the algorithm was set.
Yeah.
They weren't in control. They aren't in control. We can only just say, these are the experiments. This is what works. This is what's working now. And be ready to pivot and change.
I was listening to another podcast this morning, and I'm going to switch Tanya, and ask a question in a moment. But I heard a phrase, and it was so good because you're talking about experiments. It was traditions. Our traditions are experiments that worked.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah, I had not heard it phrased that way before. Okay,
yeah.
So we've already been down this path a little bit. So let's see if we can summarize a little bit. What do you think clients normally don't see or don't know about until you start working with them?
The things that they don't know about are, the difference between like hype and reality. So let's take AI. Everybody's talking about AI. I've heard multiple CEOs say, great, we don't need copywriters anymore. And, things like that. It isn't the case. I think there's that gap in understanding between, what it takes to achieve the goals and that desired outcomes with the reality of execution.
Right.
So I think that often, that bottom line impact, I love the word experiment. I always say hypothesize, like, Marketing is your front runner in testing hypotheses. That's who we are. And I think the best, and often when I'm recruiting, either for the permanent executive or for people on the team, I'm looking for people who are comfortable iterating and hypothesizing with frequency, with speed, figuring it out. You want to, everybody says fail fast. I prefer succeed swiftly. So, you want to iterate, learn, and keep finding those bright spots that tell you you're on the right path. I mean, that's all any of us are doing. And then you get your foothold and you expand from there. So I hope that answered your question, Dean.
Yeah, I think that was a really...
Yeah. And Mollie, do you find that your clients kind of haven't seen something about their own business or their market until you get there, or didn't know something until you start working with them?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the best blind spots is everyone thinks they're a unicorn.
Yeah.
They all say, oh, you don't know anything about my industry, or you haven't been in this industry or that industry. And a marketer by our nature is a researcher. We learn, we experiment, we collect data on all different points, on all different levels. And that's the beauty of it. We're sort of the intersection, as Tanya was saying, of science. So we're doing, it's a scientific experiment with creativity and learning, right? And so basically, the more experiments we've run across channels, across industries, the more we've seen, the better we are at our jobs. Mm-hmm. So if we've been to many industries, I think we've seen more experiments and more things work. I love, one of my favorite places to go is Vegas, because you see tourism and they are experimenting like crazy. Europe is amazing. Europe is so far, in my opinion, ahead of trying new things. They were like with the AR and VR years ago, and mobile technology. I was like, oh my goodness, they're really early adopters at this. Where then you look at, manufacturing on the other hand, and I've worked in both industries where this is the way we've always done it. And we like doing it this way, and it always works because Bob and Jim have always bought from us this way, and we know them. And finding the new path forward, you want to be marketing in new ways. You want to stand out from the competition by marketing yourself in a new way. You want to stand out from the noise, right? And to do that, to be able to adopt from those other experiments, that's what's going to make your brand stand out. So saying that that your business is a unicorn business and it's so different and you couldn't possibly understand it because you've been in other industries and not in that industry, really just it's a terrible mistake, I think, on so many marketers, on so many businesses part.
Well, and Mollie, to add to that, no amount of marketing is going to rescue lack of product market fit. Mm-hmm. So, you could do all the best marketing in the world. You can bring in the most amazing leads, but you're not going to win anything if nobody actually wants what you're selling. So I'm often impressed when businesses bring marketing in last. I'm always a little worried if they haven't brought sales in before marketing, because if they haven't actually validated that someone is going to write a check for the solution, then it's like you're maybe a little soon for me.
Yeah.
So Tanya, besides that then, what do you think a CEO should understand about fractional CMOs to sort of get the maximum value from one?
Yeah, it's, I think there's two key points that I see. So number one, when you're fractional, so when you're a full-time marketing executive, I know I have really enjoyed being the CEO's right hand. You're involved in the internal communications, you're the strategy that glues the whole company together with personas and messaging and everything like that.
Right.
When you're fractional, I mean, just by description, you're part-time. That means you're not going to be that, permanent day-to-day advisor. So I think just being mindful about what role you actually want your fractional head of marketing to be. The second thing is, I think that we are most effective when there is some team or middle management there because you do need that day-to-day person who's actually executing the vision. If you have a bunch of frontline people and no middle management and then me, you kind of run the risk of some programs not staying on track if you don't
Right.
have that support.
Molly, what do you think? What should a CEO understand about fractional CMOs if they're going to squeeze every last penny of value out of you?
Oh, looks like we lost her.
I think you're right. I'll keep an eye out because sometimes people pop in very quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a quick follow-up then. So,
Sure.
what are some signs that ideally in your vetting and sales process, this should never happen, that you get to this point? But what are signs that a client should not have hired a fractional CMO or wasn't ready? Or if you're, someone in the audience is thinking about hiring their very first fractional CMO, like, how do they know whether they're ready for a fractional CMO or not?
Yeah, I think it's you've got maybe some frontline marketing people. You're missing any middle people that could, again, be that drumbeat outside of the time. I think a fractional CMO for, Series A can help set the team up. But when you're looking at Series B and C, you really need to make sure that you've got proof of the ideal customer profile. You've been actually closing some deals. So you've got budget. So you're actually pointing people in a direction. You're trying to shape programs and investment areas, things like that. I think that the maturity of the executive team also plays a role. So how do you work with a peer that isn't there the 60 plus hours a week that the rest of the leadership team is working?
Right.
So, if they don't know how to operate that way, if the CEO or the board have never worked with someone like that, it's just a point of risk. It doesn't mean you can't figure it out. It's just different, So those would be a few things that would give me a little pause.
All right. And now a hypothetical as we wind down, right?
Yeah.
So imagine the CEO comes to you and says, hey, you and me, we're going to interview the final candidates and choose the new head of sales.
Yeah.
What are you looking for?
Number one, cultural fit. I think that's probably the most important. There's a lot of very successful sales leaders out there. So I think cultural fit is a key thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think a sales leader who shows, again, depending on where you're at, earlier stage Series A, your go-to-market is probably still in flux.
Mm-hmm.
So you need a sales leader that shows they understand the difference between we need BDRs, or we're going to go direct. We're going to do enterprise. We're going to do transactional. We're going to operate through partners, or they need to have those experiences to bring to the table so that they can also pivot, right? You're not just pivoting with the product, you're pivoting with your go-to-market as well. And then I would say the other piece is I really look for someone, and I would suggest anyone look for a head of sales or marketing who knows the personas. They don't have to have sold your solution.
Right.
They really need to know the people, right? So it could be a completely different solution, but they need to be familiar with it so that they can guide the sales team and coach and also influence marketing. Hey, here's what these people care about. That these are the hot points for these personas. Let's make sure we're getting the messaging, the product marketing messaging right. So I would look for those skills as well, that experience. It doesn't have to be the same solution, not a competitor, but just someone who knows.
Yeah, I used to see that a lot when I worked in enterprise sales, is that the salespeople would cycle among various companies, but they would keep going back to the same customers. They were not to competitors necessarily, but that, it's like, okay, I know this profile. I know what's important to these kind of people. So every time they go to a new job, they just call the old people and say, hey, I'm now selling this. How about let's, right? And that worked really well for them. So they really dug in deep on certain types of positions and personas and industries and just got in that way. Hey, welcome back, Mollie.
Sorry, guys. Our
Welcome back.
connection's been really bad. We had some really bad storms here the other night, and I don't know.
Hey.
We pay a fortune for it over here. And they can't seem to keep it on. I'm so sorry. Apologies.
No worries. So Mollie, let's finish up with a question that Tanya did a great job answering. No pressure.
Oh, great! I know.
Right. I mean, and the question is, like, you should almost never end up in this situation if you've done your sort of vetting and prospecting properly. But like you as a fractional CMO, like, what are the signs that a client really was not ready or should not have hired a fractional CMO yet?
That's an interesting. I mean, because honestly, like, I just became a fractional CMO, as you know, Dean. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh God, just be ready, please. you know, I mean, that's where I'm at, honestly. But if they're not transparent with their team, you know, they have to be ready to talk with their whole team. They have to be ready to get their whole team on board, especially. I mean, I'm in the small business to mid-market space. And if this isn't a decision that's been made with everybody throughout at least the top level, then it's not time. It's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret that they need to change and grow. It should be something that the company together has come to, because it is change and it's going to affect all their personalities. It affects people. And they have to together say, we need to do something different, because you are bringing somebody in at the top level, and it's somebody who is an instrument of change. And an instrument of change always, for better or for worse, is going to disrupt the organization.
When you said you had just started, because you come from the agency world, you've had agencies. I asked someone else.
3 different things. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been I've worked in corporate, and I've owned my own company. I own my own company for 10 years. You're doing governments, working for governments. So lots of different things.
I asked that question to someone once, not in this podcast. And they were just sort of getting started or being out on their own. I said, how do you know that someone's going to be a good customer for you? How do you know this is going to be a good fit? And they touched their right here, and they said, you qualify. In the beginning, you might not know who the perfect customer for you is, and so you're experimenting to see what's going to become a tradition, basically, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, have a pulse. Yeah, okay, we're good. Go for it.
I like that. That's good.
Okay, all right. Well, that's enough silliness for today. Thank you both very much. Tanya, how do people get in touch with you? Your LinkedIn is on the.
It sure is. You can find me on LinkedIn, and my contact info is there. Would love to hear from anyone who wants to talk.
And Mollie, how about you? Now I'm going to have that stupid karate.
I know, right?
I love it. Wish I had not talked about that.
You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. It's Mollie Barnett on LinkedIn, or through my website as well, which has my contact information as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Summon me.
I know, right? Have a great day.
So nice to
meet you.
Bye,
folks.
Bye.